Hey everyone, welcome to Module 2 of our Intro to Coding self-paced program here at Platoon. In this video, we're going to tackle some of the core building blocks of Python, which is going to be variables, data types, and basic operations. By the end of this lesson, you'll know how to store information in your program, accept user input, and perform simple math operations. Let's jump right in. What is a variable? A variable is like a container that holds information in your program. You can put different kinds of data in it, change it later if you need to, and use it in multiple times. They make our code easier to understand because we can label our data with meaningful names. Instead of memorizing specific numbers or text, we just remember the variable's name. Let's see a code example. We can create a variable by giving it a name, ideally something unique that relates to the context of your data type. The variable here is called name, and we pass in the value of Alex. Next, we can create a separate variable called age and pass in 30 to represent Alex's age. Here, name is a variable holding the string of Alex, and age is also a variable that holds the integer, or a number, of 30. We can also go ahead and print out these variables. I can say print, and I can pass in name, comma, age. And here in my output, I see that I get out Alex and 30. Accepting user input. Just like I can create a variable and pass in a direct value to it, we can also make this a little bit more dynamic. We can accept user input and set a value to a variable by asking the user to type something in. Let's create a new variable and call this user underscore name. To give it the input from our user, we're going to use another built-in function very similar to the print function that we saw earlier. This is going to be the input function. Just like the print function, it's going to require open and closing parentheses. And within the input function, we are able to pass in a message that would display to our user to give them some form of context of what should be added within the input function. Within here, I can open up some double quotes to start the message and say, what is your name? When I run this code, it's going to prompt the user for some input, displaying the message of what is your name. The user will then assign it a value, and that value will be saved to the variable called user underscore name. Finally, let's go ahead and try to print out hello. We're going to join that with the username that we are receiving from the user and some simple formatting. When I run this, we see here an input box requesting input from me with the message of what is your name, the exact same message that I added within the input function. I can say something like Jason. When I press submit, we see here it displays the message from my input message, and then finally the print statement where I'm printing out hello conjoined with the value of user underscore name. Here, the input method displayed a message asking for input, and whatever the user typed in is saved into the variable called username. The input function will always return a string, even if the user types a number in. Let's see another example. Instead of username, let's say user underscore age. We're going to receive input from the user And we're going to ask the user, how old are you? Finally, we're going to go ahead and print out a formatted string of you are. We're going to join that with our variable called user age. And join that with the text of years old. We can run this. The input function asks me for input utilizing that message I declared. How old are you? I can say something like 25. And then I see here in my output box, I get the output of you are 25 years old. So not only can I pass in text, but I can also pass in numbers. Now, something important to notice. Even though it looks like a number, the input treats it as a text. If you want to use it, oh my God. Getting a number from the user, even though it looks like a number, input treats it as text. Even though it looks like a number, input treats it as text. If you want to use it in math, you'll need to convert it to an integer or a float, but we'll get into that later. Now that you know how to store both hard-coded values and user input in variables, let's talk about the different types of data you might store. Some of the more common data types will be your integers, which are also known as your whole numbers. Floats, which is your decimal point values. Strings, which is your text. And booleans, which are going to be your true and false values. Now, let's look at what you can actually do with these variables in data types like math, combining text, and checking comparisons. We're going to create a new variable called my name. And once again, we are going to use the input function to receive input from the user. We're going to ask the user, what's your name? And we are also going to ask for the age by using the input function and ask, how old are you? Finally, let's go ahead and try to print both of these variables out. We can say my name is, and I'm going to join this with the variable of my name. Then join it with another string that says NIM. Join this with the variable of my age. And join this with years old. Let's give this a try. What is your name? I can say Jose. I am 28 years old. Here we see the output of my name is Jose and I am 28 years old. It could use some formatting, but this works so far. So here we were able to use strings to create a variable for my name. Here we technically passed in a number, but as I mentioned earlier, it got treated as a string. So how do we make sure that we can treat this number of, in this case, 28, convert it into some kind of integer and use it as an integer? Well, to convert values from one data type to another, we do what we call typecasting, right? And typecasting is you quite literally cast the type of one data type to another. And we do this by using wrappers. So everything that comes back from this input function is supposed to be a string. So we would like to wrap this entire input function within a wrapper that can convert the result of this into an integer. And to convert a string to an integer, we use the int wrapper, which is very similar to the input function or the print function, where it uses the open and close parentheses. So notice here we start this off with int for integer, and then we open up the parentheses to wrap the start of the input, and then we wrap it at the end with some closing parentheses to show where the end of this part should result at. And this is going to convert it into an integer. I run this, and we're going to get an error. I see here on line 4, I have an error, and it says it can only concatenate strings, not integers. And that is because when I try to use this method of conjoining these strings together, it tries to add the my age because it's an integer, but notice that these are strings, so at the same time it's getting confused, like, do I add these or do I join them together? So I can get around this by switching the plus sign with commas. So instead of joining all these things together, I'm going ahead and display each one of them individually in their own little slot. I can run this again. And I see here my name is, there's a comma, followed by the next value to be printed out, which is Jose, comma, the string of NIM, comma, followed by the my age, the comma, and then finally years old. So I am printing out 5 different values here. 3 of these are hard-coded strings, and 2 of these are variables. But the print statement treats each one of these as their own individual value to be printed out separately, just back to back. Nothing is being joined here. These are all separate print statements. Now, we saw strings. We saw integers and how they interact with strings. Let's try something like decimals. Let's create a variable called pi value. Now I'm going to set this to 3.14. Let's remove that print statement from earlier, as well as the my age and my name, so we don't get the pop-up asking for input. And then after we pass in this pi value, let's go ahead and create a new variable called radius. Radius is going to hold the value of 5. So we have 2 different variables here. One is an integer, and one is a float. The float is our pi value. We know that because it has a decimal point between the 3 and the 1. We can do some basic math by creating a new variable called area circle, where I'm going to take this pi value and I'm going to multiply it by the radius to the power of 2. Now, we're not going to get too deep into it in this lesson, but to multiply, we use the asterisk symbol, which symbolizes the multiplication. And as we recall from middle school or elementary math, we want to pass in our radius, and that's going to be multiplied to the power of 2. Now, to do exponent or to the power of in coding, without getting too deep into it, we're going to use 2 asterisks. A single asterisk is multiplication, and double asterisk is for exponents. 2 asterisks, and then the 2. So this quite literally says we're going to do radius to the power of 2. The result of this is going to be multiplied by the pi value, and the result is going to be saved into the area circle. Finally, let's go ahead and print out a circle with radius. And because these are strings and numbers and floats, they're not going to interact very nicely. So we'll just use commas to print each individual value independently. Next will be radius, followed by has an area of, followed by area circle. We run this and we see here that a circle with radius 5 has an area of, and we get 78.5. Now, I'm not doing this math from the top of my head, but I'm going to go ahead and assume this is correct. Here, we introduce the integers, we introduce floats, strings, even how to typecast a string to an integer, or how to do some very basic math. Now, some common pitfalls. You want to make sure that you use descriptive variable names. It is very easy to get complacent and add very abstract names and then forget what the variables should be called. You want to be very careful when mixing strings and numbers, especially when working with the input function. As you saw today, strings and integers don't work that well with each other when trying to use addition, multiplication, or even joining strings together. Also, I want you to remember that Python is case sensitive. So if I were to have something like radius in lowercase and create another variable called radius in capital case and assign this to 10, these will be two different variables. So be very careful. You've just taken an important step in your Python journey. Now you understand what variables are, how to accept user input, and how to work with different data types and basic operations. In our next video, we're going to dive deeper into how Python handles strings and numbers, and we'll even explore more ways to play with them. Until then, practice these basics, try creating a program that asks the user for their name, age, and favorite number, and display a fun message back. I'll see you soon.